The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched far beyond what most eyes could see. Thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds sat in rows that went up and up until they disappeared into shadows. The air buzzed with the sounds of many different languages being translated by machines. Some creatures breathed different gases, so force fields kept their air separate. Others needed different gravity, so they floated in special bubbles. At the center of it all stood a very old being. Her name was Elder Velthari, and she was from a race called the Ethans. Her skin looked like old paper, thin and covered with lines. Her eyes were silver and seemed to hold the memory of 1,000 years. She was one of the last of her kind, and her people had watched the galaxy longer than anyone else. Elder Velthari raised one thin hand, and the noise in the great hall slowly died down. When she spoke, her voice was soft but clear. Every word reached every corner of the huge room. "Council members," she began, "I come before you today with a warning. In my 3,000 years of life, I have seen many species rise from their home worlds. I have watched them take their first steps into space. I have seen the strong ones grow into empires. I have seen the weak ones disappear into history." A low murmur went through the crowd. The Ethans were known for their wisdom, but they were also known for being very careful and slow to act. Many of the younger species thought they worried too much about everything. "But now," Elder Velthari continued, "I have seen something new, something that my people have never encountered in all our long watching. There is a species on a small blue world in the outer rim. They call themselves humans." At this, several beings in the crowd made sounds that were clearly laughter. The translation machines turned these sounds into words that everyone could understand as amusement and disbelief. Council Speaker Zephion stood up from his large chair. He was from the Corvan Empire, a race of warriors who had conquered many worlds. His body was covered in thick armor-like skin, and his voice was deep and strong. "Elder Velthari, with great respect for your age and wisdom, are you speaking of the primitive beings who have not even learned to travel faster than light? The ones who still fight wars with chemical explosives on their own world?" More laughter filled the hall. Even some of the more serious council members seemed amused. The idea that a species still stuck on one world could be important seemed silly to most of them. Elder Velthari waited for the noise to stop. Her face did not change. She had expected this reaction. "Yes, Speaker Zephion. Those humans, the ones you call primitive." "Elder," said another voice from the crowd. This one belonged to Trademaster Velkari, whose people controlled most of the money and trade in the galaxy. "These humans have not even made contact with any of our species. Our scouts report that they have barely reached their own moon. How can beings who cannot even leave their own star system be a concern to us?" The old Ethan nodded slowly. "I understand your doubt, but listen to what our watchers have seen. These humans have something we have never encountered in any other species. When they are faced with a problem that seems impossible to solve, they do not give up. When they are cornered with no way out, they do not surrender. They find a way. All species fight when cornered," Speaker Zephion said with a wave of his large hand. "This is basic survival instinct." "No," Elder Velthari said, and for the first time her voice became stronger. "You do not understand. When most species are faced with the impossible, they accept it. They change their goals. They find a different path. But humans refuse to accept that anything is truly impossible. They will throw themselves at a problem, again and again, each time learning, each time adapting, until they find a solution that no one else could imagine." She paused and looked around the great hall. Many of the beings there looked bored. Some were talking among themselves, not even listening anymore. "Our watchers have studied their history," the elder continued. "In their past, humans crossed vast oceans in tiny boats when everyone said it could not be done. They learned to fly when their own scientists said it was impossible. They went to their moon using machines that should not have worked. And each time when experts said something could not be done, humans found a way to do it anyway." "Interesting stories," said another council member. "But what does this have to do with us?" They are still trapped on their one world. Elder Velthari's silver eyes seem to look into the future. Because, council members, they will not stay trapped for long. Our scouts report that they are already building ships to visit other worlds in their system. They are sending messages into space hoping to find other intelligent life, and when they do make contact with us, when they see what we have achieved, they will not be impressed. They will be inspired. Inspired to do what? Trademaster Velkari asked. To do it better, the elder replied simply. This brought more laughter from the crowd. The idea that a primitive species could improve on technologies that had been developed over thousands of years seemed ridiculous. But Elder Velthari was not finished. I have one more thing to tell you about these humans. Something that makes them more dangerous than any warrior race, more disruptive than any revolution. Humans do not just refuse to accept defeat for themselves. They refuse to accept it for others as well. What do you mean? Speaker Zephion asked. His amusement was starting to fade into curiosity. When humans see injustice, they cannot ignore it. When they see the weak being crushed by the strong, they cannot walk away. They will fight battles that are not their own, for people they have never met, simply because they believe it is right to do so. The great hall became quieter. This was beginning to sound less like the rambling of an old being, and more like a real warning. In their history, Elder Velthari continued, humans have freed slaves who were not their own people. They have fought wars to protect strangers. They have shared their food with enemies during times of hunger. They have a saying, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. Humans refuse to do nothing. Trademaster Velkari shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His people had built their empire on carefully balanced trade agreements that often favored stronger species over weaker ones. The idea of beings who would disrupt such arrangements for moral reasons was troubling. Elder, he said carefully, even if what you say is true, these humans are still just one species on one world. The galaxy is vast. What could they possibly do to change anything? Elder Velthari smiled, and it was not a comforting expression. They will do what they always do when faced with impossible odds. They will find a way. And when they do, everything we know about how the galaxy works will change. You speak as if they are some kind of unstoppable force, Speaker Zephion said with a snort. They are flesh and blood like all of us. They can be defeated like any other species. Can they? The elder asked. Our watchers have studied their wars. Humans have been defeated in individual battles, yes. But humans as a whole have never been truly conquered. Every time a stronger force has tried to crush them completely, humans have found a way to survive, to adapt, and eventually to overcome their oppressors. They turn defeats into learning experiences. They turn setbacks into motivation. She paused again, letting her words sink in. But more than that, they inspire others to resist as well. Humans have a gift for making other beings believe that freedom is possible, that tyranny can be defeated, that a better way of life is within reach. The hall was getting more uncomfortable. Many of the species represented in the council had built their power on keeping other species under their control. The Corvan Empire ruled through military might. The Velkari controlled through economic pressure. Dozens of other species maintained their positions through various forms of domination. What exactly are you asking us to do, Elder? Speaker Zephion asked. I am asking you to prepare, Elder Velthari replied. These humans will reach the stars, soon. When they do, they will not quietly take their place in the order we have built. They will question why things are the way they are. They will ask uncomfortable questions about why some species serve others. They will wonder why trade agreements always seem to favor the same groups. They will not accept that inequality is natural or necessary. And then? Trademaster Velkari asked, though he seemed to already know the answer. And then they will set about changing things, the elder said simply. Not through conquest, though they are capable of that. Not through force, though they are not afraid to fight. They will change things by showing others that change is possible. They will be living proof that the weak do not have to stay weak, that the oppressed do not have to stay oppressed. Elder Velthari looked around the great hall one more time. Many of the beings there were no longer laughing. Some looked thoughtful, others looked worried. A few looked angry at the suggestion that their way of life might be threatened. "I have given you my warning," she said. "What you do with it is your choice. But remember this. In all my years of watching, I have learned one truth that never changes. Those who refuse to adapt to new realities are swept away by them. The galaxy is about to meet a species that does not accept the word impossible. I suggest you think carefully about what that means for all of us." With that, Elder Velthari walked slowly back. Captain Minho Kim stood on the bridge of the exploration ship Determination and watched the stars shift around them as they dropped out of faster-than-light travel. It had taken humanity 15 years to develop this technology after reverse engineering, principles from an alien probe that had crashed on Mars. The ship was not beautiful or graceful like the vessels he had seen in the pictures sent by the probe. It was built for function, not form, with thick armor and redundant systems. "Captain," said Lieutenant Hyun Cho from the navigation station, "we're reading multiple ships ahead, large ones. They don't match any designs in our database." Minho nodded. They had expected this. The probe that crashed on Mars had contained star charts and basic information about galactic civilization. Humanity knew they were not alone, and they knew they were far behind in technology. But they had come to the stars anyway, because that was what humans did. "Dr. Park," Minho called to the ship's xenobiologist, "are you ready for this?" Dr. Yoonji Park looked up from her instruments, her face showing both excitement and nervousness. "As ready as anyone can be for first contact, Captain. The translation software is loaded with everything we learned from the probe. It should handle basic communication." "Engineering status?" Minho asked. Engineer Dane Lee's voice came through the communication system from the engine room. "All systems running normally, Captain, though I still say we should have brought more ships." Minho almost smiled at that. Humanity had built exactly 3 ships capable of faster-than-light travel. The other 2 were still in Earth's system, defending their home world just in case this first contact went badly. The Determination was alone out here, carrying the EI, hopes and fears of an entire species. "Contact the alien ships," Minho ordered. "Standard peaceful greeting protocols." Lieutenant Hyun Cho worked at his console for a moment, then looked up. "Message sent, Captain. We're broadcasting on all standard frequencies, using the mathematical and musical sequences from the probe data." They waited. Minutes passed in silence, as radio waves carried humanity's first words to an alien civilization. Then Lieutenant Cho straightened in his chair. "Incoming transmission, Captain. It's commanding. They want us to shut down our engines and prepare to be boarded." Dr. Park frowned at her translation display. "Captain, the language pattern suggests this is not a request. They're treating us like criminals or prisoners." Before Minho could respond, Lieutenant Cho called out again. "Captain, multiple ships are surrounding us. They're much larger than we are, and they're powering up weapons." Minho felt his stomach tighten. This was not how first contact was supposed to go according to any of the scenarios they had planned. "Open a channel," he ordered. A new voice filled the bridge, speaking in a language that the translation software turned into accented but understandable words. "Primitive vessel, you have entered Corvin space without permission. You will surrender immediately or be destroyed. You have 30 seconds to comply." "Captain," Lieutenant Cho said quietly, "their weapons are locked onto us. If we try to run, they'll destroy us before we can jump to faster-than-light travel." Minho looked around. His small bridge crew, these were the best people humanity had to offer, trained for years for this moment. Dr. Park was brilliant, able to understand alien biology and culture. Lieutenant Cho was a master navigator and tactical officer. Engineer Lee could fix anything and make impossible machines work. But none of that seemed to matter now, faced with alien warships that could destroy them with ease. "Send a message," Minho said finally. "Tell them we surrender, but that we want to communicate. We're explorers, not invaders." The response came quickly. "You will shut down all systems except life support. Any attempt to send messages or activate weapons will result in your immediate destruction. Prepare for boarding." The alien ships moved, closer, and one of them extended a docking tube toward the determination. Minho watched helplessly as beings in environmental suits crossed from their ship to his. When they entered the bridge, he got his first look at the Corvins. They were large, nearly 8 feet tall, with thick skin that looked like natural armor. Their faces were angular and fierce, with eyes that showed no mercy. The leader of the boarding party looked around the human bridge with obvious contempt. "So these are the primitives who think they can travel the stars," the alien said. "You are even more pathetic than our scouts reported." Dr. Park stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. "We come in peace. We only want to learn about other civilizations and share knowledge." The Corvin leader laughed, a harsh sound that needed no translation. "Peace? Knowledge? You entered our space without permission. That is an act of war. You will come with us to face judgment." "What kind of judgment?" Minho asked. "Our scientists will study you to determine if your species is worth keeping alive, or if you should be eliminated before you become a threat to civilized beings." The words hit the bridge crew like a physical blow. They had dreamed of meeting other intelligent life for so long, and now they were being told they might be killed simply for existing. "Move," the Corvin ordered. "All of you, now." The crew of the Determination was herded off their ship and onto the alien vessel. As they walked through corridors that were clearly designed for beings much larger than humans, Minho tried to memorize everything he saw. The way the walls were built, the type of lighting, the sounds the ship made. If they survived this, every detail might be important. They were taken to what was clearly a prison area and separated into individual cells. The walls were made of some kind of metal that blocked radio signals, and the doors were solid barriers with no way to see out. But the Corvins had made a mistake. They had designed their prison for species that thought like they did. Humans thought differently. Dr. Park was the first to discover that the ventilation system connected all the cells. The openings were too small for most alien species to use, but humans were smaller and more flexible. Within hours, she had found a way to crawl through the air ducts and visit each of her crewmates. "They're taking us to their main research station," she whispered to Minho when she reached his cell. "I overheard them talking. They plan to study our biology and psychology to determine if humans are a threat." "How long do we have?" Minho asked. 3 days travel time, maybe less. Minho nodded. "Then we have 3 days to find a way out of this. Tell the others to start observing everything. How the guards move when they change shifts, what systems they can access from the cells. Humans are good at solving problems. Let's solve this one." Over the next 2 days, the crew of the Determination did what humans had always done when faced with impossible situations. They learned, they adapted, and they planned. Engineer Dane Lee discovered that the cell's waste disposal system could be accessed and modified. Lieutenant Cho mapped the guard rotation and found a pattern in their movements. Dr. Park studied the aliens themselves, learning their physical capabilities and limitations. And Captain Minho put it all together into a plan that should not have worked. On the 3rd day, just hours before they were supposed to arrive at the research station, the humans made their move. Using parts from the waste disposal system, Lee had built crude tools. Using knowledge of the guard patterns, Cho had identified the perfect moment to act. Using her understanding of Corvin biology, Dr. Park had prepared a distraction that would confuse their captors. The escape began when Dr. Park triggered a false medical emergency in her cell. When the guards came to investigate, they found her appearing to suffer from some kind of alien disease. While they were distracted, Lieutenant Cho used Lee's tools to break out of his cell and disable the nearby security systems. What happened next was something the Corvins had never experienced. Instead of trying to fight their way off the ship or steal a shuttle, the humans did something completely unexpected. They began taking control of the ship itself. Engineer Lee had spent 2 days learning how Corvin technology worked by observing and listening. Now he put that knowledge to use, accessing the ship's main computer and beginning to turn the vessel's own systems against its crew. Lights went out in some sections and became blindingly bright in others. Gravity failed in the guard quarters. The air circulation system began pumping irritating chemicals into areas where Corvin crew members were stationed. Lieutenant Cho used his tactical knowledge to coordinate the chaos, making sure the disruptions hit the aliens in the right order, to cause maximum confusion. Meanwhile, Dr. Park used her understanding of alien psychology to send false messages over the ship's communication system, making different sections of the crew think they were under attack by different enemies. Captain Minho coordinated it all, turning his crew's individual skills into a perfect storm of confusion and misdirection. By the time the Corvin captain realized what was happening, it was too late. The humans had not just escaped from their cells, they had taken control of his ship. The final confrontation took place on the bridge where Admiral Thexwar found himself facing 4 humans who should have been helpless prisoners. His crew was scattered throughout the ship, dealing with system failures and false alarms. His weapons were offline. His communications were jammed by his own equipment. "What manner of beings are you?" the Admiral asked, his voice filled with shock and something. General Jiho Kang stood before the United Earth Defense Committee in a room deep beneath the mountains of Korea. Around the table sat the leaders of every nation on Earth, their faces grim as they listened to the report from Captain Minho Kim's mission. The news was not good. "The Corvin Empire has declared war on humanity," General Kang said, his voice steady despite the weight of his words. "Their fleet is already moving toward our system. Intelligence estimates they will arrive in 6 weeks. President Chen of the Pacific Federation leaned forward in her chair. "How many ships are we facing, General?" 12,000 combat vessels ranging from small fighters to massive battleships. They have been building this fleet for over 2 centuries. The silence in the room was heavy. Everyone knew the next question, but no one wanted to ask it. Finally, Director Nakamura of the European Union spoke. "How many ships do we have?" 12, General Kang replied simply. The number hit the room like a physical blow. 12 ships against 12,000. It was not a war. It was going to be a massacre. "What about our allies?" asked Premier Volkov of the Russian Republic. "Surely other species will help us against Corvin aggression." Captain Minho Kim, who had been standing quietly beside General Kang, shook his head. "Sir, we learned during our capture that the Corvin Empire has conquered 47 star systems in the past century. The other species in the Galactic Council don't interfere with their expansion. They see it as the natural order." "Natural order," President Chen repeated bitterly. "The strong take from the weak and everyone else looks the other way." General Kang nodded. "That appears to be how galactic civilization works, Madam President. But they've never faced humans before." "General," said Defense Minister Williams of the North American Union, "I respect your optimism, but 12 ships against 12,000 is not a battle. It's suicide." "Yes, sir, it would be," General Kang agreed. "If we fought like they expect us to fight. If we lined up our ships against theirs and tried to trade shots like gentlemen. But humans don't fight like gentlemen when our survival is at stake." He activated the holographic display in the center of the room. It showed the solar system, with Earth at the center and the predicted Corvin approach routes marked in red. "The Corvins have spent centuries perfecting their military doctrine," General Kang continued. "They use overwhelming force, direct assault, and traditional fleet formations. It has worked for them because every species they've fought has tried to match them strength for strength." "And we're going to do something different?" Premier Volkov asked. "We're going to do what humans have always done when faced with impossible odds," General Kang said. "We're going to change the rules." Over the next hour, General Kang laid out a strategy that would have been considered insane by any military academy in the galaxy. Instead of protecting Earth directly, humanity's 12 ships would scatter throughout the solar system. Instead of engaging the Corvin fleet in battle, they would avoid it entirely. Instead of trying to destroy the enemy, they would make it impossible for the enemy to function. "You're talking about guerrilla warfare in space," Defense Minister Williams said slowly. "Yes, sir, exactly that." "General," President Chen said, "guerrilla warfare works when you have places to hide, local support, and supply lines. Space is empty. There's nowhere to hide, No one to help us and no way to resupply. General Kang smiled for the first time since the meeting began. Madam President, with respect, space is not empty. It's full of asteroids, comets, debris fields, and radiation zones that can hide a small ship if you know how to use them. As for support and supplies, we'll take them from the enemy. He changed the display to show detailed scans of Corvin ships that had been taken during Captain Kim's escape. Their vessels are built for large fleet actions. They have powerful shields and weapons, but they depend on supply ships for fuel, ammunition, and spare parts. They expect to fight short, decisive battles. They're not prepared for a long campaign against an enemy they can't pin down. Captain Kim stepped forward. General Kang is right. During our time on their ship, we learned that Corvin technology is very advanced, but also very specialized. Their ships are designed to work together in large formations. Take away that coordination, and they become much less effective. How do we take away their coordination? Director Nakamura asked. We make them fight the kind of war they've never had to fight before, General Kang replied. We hit their supply lines. We attack their communication relays. We make them paranoid about every asteroid, every piece of space debris, every shadow, where a human ship might be hiding. The holographic display changed again, this time showing the planned deployment of Earth's tiny fleet. Captain Soranam would take the experimental fighter Phoenix and a squadron of smaller ships to the outer system, where they would use the asteroid belt as cover for hit-and-run attacks. Admiral Bora Yun would command the larger ships in a mobile defense around the inner planets, never staying in one place long enough for the Corvins to bring their superior firepower to bear. The key, General Kang explained, is that we never let them fight the war they want to fight. Every time they set up for a traditional battle, we disappear. Every time they think they know where we are, we hit them somewhere else. Every time they adapt to our tactics, we change them. Defense Minister Williams looked skeptical. General, this plan assumes that our pilots can outfly Corvin veterans, that our ships can outmaneuver their fleet, and that we can maintain this kind of campaign for months or even years. What if we're wrong? Then we die, General Kang said simply. But if we try to fight them the conventional way, we die anyway. At least this way, we make them work for it. The Earth Defense Committee voted unanimously to approve General Kang's strategy. There was really no choice. Conventional warfare would mean certain defeat. Unconventional warfare might mean defeat too, but it also offered a small chance of victory. Over the next 6 weeks, humanity prepared for war like no species in galactic history had ever prepared. Every ship was modified for stealth and speed, rather than armor and heavy weapons. Every pilot was trained in tactics that emphasized escape and evasion over direct confrontation. Every crew member learned to see the solar system not as empty space, but as a three-dimensional battlefield full of hiding places and opportunities. When the Corvin fleet finally arrived, Admiral Thexwar expected to find Earth's defenses arrayed in front of their homeworld, ready for a glorious battle that would end in human surrender within hours. Instead, he found nothing. Where are they? He demanded of his tactical officer. Unknown, Admiral. Our sensors detect no large concentrations of human ships. There are some scattered contacts, but they appear to be civilian vessels fleeing the system. Admiral Thexwar frowned. In all his years of conquest, he had never encountered a species that simply refused to defend their homeworld. Send a message to the human government. Tell them they have 12 hours to surrender unconditionally or we will begin bombing their planet. The response came not from Earth's government, but from Captain Soranam, broadcasting from somewhere in the outer asteroid belt. Admiral Thexwar, this is Captain Nam of the Human Defense Forces. Your fleet is trespassing in our system. You have 12 hours to leave, or we will begin destroying your ships. The bridge of the Corvin flagship erupted in laughter. The idea that 12 primitive ships could threaten a fleet of 12,000 was absurd. 12 hours, Admiral Thexwar replied. We will enjoy watching you try. The war began not with a massive battle, but with a single torpedo strike on a Corvin supply ship at the edge of the system. The ship was destroyed before it could even send a distress signal. Its cargo of fuel and spare parts was scattered across several square kilometers of space. But somehow the explosion pattern looked almost deliberate. "Admiral," the tactical officer reported, "we've lost the supply vessel strength of Corvin. Cause unknown." Before Admiral Thexwar could respond, another report came in. A communication relay in the outer system had gone silent. Then another. Then a patrol ship reported contact with human fighters, but when reinforcements arrived, they found only empty space and debris. "What are they doing?" Admiral Thexwar demanded. His chief of staff, Commander Veltor, studied the tactical display with growing confusion. "Sir, they appear to be attacking our support infrastructure rather than engaging our main fleet. Then we will hunt them down and destroy them. Deploy the fleet in search formations." But hunting humans in space proved to be like trying to catch smoke with bare hands. Every time Corvin ships moved to investigate a disturbance, they found nothing but empty space. Every time they thought they had cornered a human vessel, it vanished into asteroid fields or radiation zones where Corvin sensors could not follow. Meanwhile, the attacks continued. Supply ships disappeared. Communication relays went dark. Patrol vessels were destroyed by enemies that struck without warning and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. Captain Soranam and her fighter squadron became masters of this new kind of warfare. They would hide in asteroid fields for days, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. When Corvin ships came close, the humans would attack not with direct assaults, but with carefully placed explosives that turned the asteroids themselves into weapons. Admiral Bora. The news traveled through the galaxy faster than any ship could fly. In cantinas on distant worlds, traders whispered about the species that had made the mighty Corvin Empire retreat. In the halls of power on 100 different planets, leaders tried to understand what this meant for the careful balance that had kept the galaxy stable for thousands of years. Ambassador Wujin Lim sat in the luxurious offices of the Velkari Trade Consortium on the planet Nexus Prime, watching the alien across from him try to hide his nervousness. Trademaster Chinvel was one of the most powerful economic leaders in the galaxy, controlling shipping routes that connected 50 star systems. He was not used to being nervous about anything. "Ambassador Lim," Chinvel said, his translator turning, his complex speech patterns into smooth human words. "I trust you understand the honor the consortium does you by offering these trade agreements directly. Most new species must wait decades for such an opportunity." Wu Jin nodded politely and looked at the documents displayed on the holographic projector between them. The trade agreements were thousands of pages long, written in legal language so complex that even the translation software struggled with some sections. But the basic terms were clear enough. Humanity would provide raw materials and basic manufactured goods to the consortium, and in return would receive advanced technology and access to galactic markets. It was the same agreement that every new species was forced to sign, the same agreement that kept most of the galaxy's species trapped in economic relationships that favored the established powers. The same agreement that made the Velkari Trade Consortium one of the richest and most powerful organizations in known space. "I appreciate the consortium's offer," Wu Jin said carefully, "but I'm afraid I'll have to decline." The silence that followed was so complete that Wu Jin could hear the air circulation system in the walls. Trademaster Chinvel stared at him as if he had just announced his intention to breathe vacuum. "I'm sorry," Chinvel said finally. "Did you say decline?" "Yes, sir. The terms are not acceptable to humanity." "Ambassador Lim," Chinvel said, his voice taking on a harder edge, "perhaps you do not understand the situation. These are not negotiations. These are standard galactic trade protocols. Every species signs them. Then we'll be the first species not to sign them." Chinvel leaned back in his chair, which was designed for a being much larger than a human. "Ambassador, I think you may be confused about how galactic economics work. Without consortium approval, your species cannot engage in interstellar trade. Without trade, you cannot obtain the resources and technology you need to grow. Without growth, you will stagnate and eventually fall behind other species." Wu Jin smiled. "Trademaster, I think you may be confused about how humans work. We don't accept that we need your permission to trade with other species. We don't accept that economic relationships have to be one-sided. And we certainly don't accept that we have to stay trapped in agreements that benefit you more than us. Then you are fools, Chinville said bluntly. The consortium will place a trade embargo on humanity. No ships will carry your goods. No markets will accept your products. You will be economically isolated until you come to your senses. That's your choice, Wu Jin replied. But you might want to consider the consequences. What consequences? You are one small species with a handful of primitive ships. What can you possibly do to the consortium? Wu Jin stood up and walked to the large window that showed the bustling spaceport of Nexus Prime. Hundreds of ships from dozens of species came and went, carrying goods across the galaxy in a complex web of trade that had remained unchanged for centuries. Trademaster, he said. You control galactic trade because you control the technology that makes it possible. Faster than light communication, advanced manufacturing, efficient shipping systems. Other species have to buy these things from you because they can't make them themselves. Exactly, Chinville said with satisfaction. That is how the system works. But what happens when someone figures out how to make them better and cheaper? Before Chinville could answer, Wu Jin's communication device chimed. He glanced at it and smiled. Excuse me, Trademaster, but I have an important call. The holographic display activated, showing Dr. Nari Song calling from Earth. Behind her, Wu Jin could see the sprawling research facility where humanity's best scientists had been working around the clock since the war with the Corvins ended. Ambassador, Dr. Song said, I wanted to give you the good news personally. We've done it. All of it? All of it. Faster than light communication systems that are twice as fast as consortium standard and cost half as much to build. Manufacturing techniques that can produce complex electronics using materials we can find in any asteroid belt. And the new ship design is ready for testing. Wu Jin looked back at Trademaster Chinville, who was staring at the communication with growing alarm. Dr. Song, how long until we can begin production? The first factories will be online within 6 months. We can have commercial products ready for sale within a year. Excellent. Begin preparations for the trade exhibition. I think we're about to have a lot of interested customers. The communication ended and Wu Jin turned back to Chinville. Trademaster, let me explain what just happened. While you were offering us your standard agreements, our scientists were reverse engineering every piece of consortium technology we could get our hands on. Not to copy it, but to improve it. That's impossible, Chinville said, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? Humans have a saying, necessity is the mother of invention. You tried to force us into an economic box, so we built a better box. Wu Jin activated his own holographic display, showing technical specifications and manufacturing data that made Chinville's alien features go pale. Our communication systems use quantum entanglement principles that your scientists dismissed as impractical. Our manufacturing systems use molecular assembly techniques that your engineers said were too dangerous to attempt. Our ships use engine designs that your experts claimed would never work. Even if this is true, Chinville said desperately, you cannot compete with the consortium. We have established trade routes, trusted relationships, centuries of experience. You're right, Wu Jin agreed. We can't compete with you using your methods, so we won't. Over the next hour, Wu Jin explained humanity's new approach to galactic trade. Instead of building a centralized system controlled by a few powerful groups, humans were creating an open network where any species could participate equally. Instead of requiring expensive licenses and complex agreements, human technology would be shared freely with anyone who wanted to use it. But how do you make a profit? Chinville asked, genuinely confused. We make things people want to buy, and we sell them at fair prices, Wu Jin replied. It's not complicated. But if you share your technology freely, other species will copy it and compete with you. Good. Competition makes everyone better. When someone improves our designs, we learn from them and improve our own. Chinville stared at him as if he were speaking in an alien language. The idea of voluntary cooperation and open competition was so foreign to galactic economics that the trademaster couldn't process it. This will never work, he said finally. Galactic trade requires stability, predictability, control. What you're proposing is chaos. What we're proposing is freedom, Wu Jin corrected. The freedom for every species to trade with whoever they want, to buy the best products at the best prices, to compete on equal terms. 6 months later, the Velkari Trade Consortium's embargo on humanity had become a joke, not because it had been lifted, but because it had become irrelevant. Human products were so much better and cheaper than consortium alternatives that species across the galaxy were abandoning their old contracts to buy from Earth. The breakthrough came when Commander Tyke Moon, who had been promoted to head of UGUR, Human Peacekeeping Forces, after his role in the Corvan War, received a message from an unexpected source. The Threx Autonomous Region, a collection of mining worlds that had been under Corvan control for 8 centuries, was asking for help. Commander Moon, the message said, we have heard that humans fight wars differently than other species. We have heard that you defeated the Corvans not through superior strength but through superior strategy. We are not warriors. We are miners and farmers and craftsmen. But we are tired of being slaves. Will you teach us how to fight for our freedom? Moon brought the message to Admiral Borayun, who had been promoted to overall commander of Earth's military forces. Admiral, this could be exactly what we've been waiting for. How so? The Threx situation isn't unique. There are dozens of species across the galaxy who are trapped in relationships they can't escape. Some are controlled by the Corvans, others by different empires. But they all have one thing in common. They've been told that their situation is unchangeable. Admiral Yun nodded slowly. And humans have never been very good at accepting that things can't be changed. Exactly. We've already proven that the Corvans can be defeated. We've shown that the consortium's economic control can be broken. Now we can demonstrate that oppression itself is not permanent. The decision to help the Threx was not made lightly. Earth's government knew that intervening in the affairs of other species could lead to complications they weren't prepared for. But they also knew that standing by while Elder Velthari stood at the observation deck of the ancient Ethan monastery ship, watching the stars drift by as her people made their final journey. She was the last of her kind now, the final keeper of 3,000 years of accumulated wisdom. Her body was failing, her time running short, but her mind remained sharp enough to understand what was happening in the galaxy around her. 5 years had passed since she had warned the Galactic Council about humanity. 5 years since they had laughed at her concerns and dismissed her words as the fears of a dying race. Now, as she prepared for her own death, she could see that everything she had predicted was coming to pass. The communication device beside her chimed softly, indicating an incoming message. The holographic display activated, showing President Mirahan of the Free Systems Alliance standing in what appeared to be a vast assembly hall, filled with beings from hundreds of different species. Elder Velthari, President Han said, her voice carrying the respectful tone that humans always used when speaking to their elders. Thank you for accepting our invitation. I know the journey was difficult for you. Velthari smiled, an expression that looked strange on her ancient features. President Han, after 3 millennia of watching from the sidelines, I could hardly miss the opportunity to see the galaxy's transformation firsthand. The scene behind President Han shifted, showing the incredible diversity of the Free Systems Alliance assembly. Species that had been enemies for centuries sat side by side. Former slaves debated policy with their old masters, who had joined the alliance rather than face economic isolation. Warriors and pacifists, traders and farmers, scientists and artists, all working together in a way that galactic civilization had never seen before. Elder, President Han continued, many of these species have requested the opportunity to thank you personally. Your warning to the Council 5 years ago was recorded and preserved. When my people arrived in this galaxy, we found your words had already planted seeds of hope in minds that had given up on change. I did very little, Velthari replied. I merely spoke the truth as I saw it. Sometimes speaking truth is the most powerful action anyone can take. Velthari looked past the holographic display to the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, the old Galactic Council was meeting an emergency session for the 3rd time this year, trying to figure out how to respond to the collapse of everything they had built. The Corvan Empire had split into dozens of independent systems, most of which had joined the Free Systems Alliance. The Velkari Trade Consortium had dissolved entirely, its member species preferring the open trade networks that humans had established. "Tell me, President Han," Velthari said, "do you ever regret what your species has done? The old order was stable, predictable. What you have created is chaotic, constantly changing." President Han considered the question carefully. "Elder, my brother is Admiral Junho Park. He commands our defense fleet now. A few days ago, he told me something that I think answers your question." The holographic display shifted to show Admiral Park standing on the bridge of a ship that was clearly of human design, but crewed by beings from a dozen different species. His uniform bore the symbol of the Free Systems Alliance, but his face carried the same determination that had characterized humans since their first contact with galactic civilization. "Elder Velthari," Admiral Park said, "my sister asked me to share this with you. Yesterday we received a distress call from a species called the Mindari. They live in a system on the far edge of the galaxy, and they've never had contact with any of us before. A rogue planet had entered their star system and was going to destroy their homeworld." Velthari nodded. Such cosmic disasters were rare but not unheard of. Under the old system, distant species facing natural catastrophes were usually left to face their fate alone. Rescue operations were expensive and offered no political or economic benefits to the major powers. "What did you do?" she asked. "We mobilized every available ship," Admiral Park replied simply. "Human vessels, former Corvan warships, Threx mining, craft, Velkari cargo haulers. Over 300 ships from 50 different species. We had 6 weeks to evacuate 40 million Mindari to temporary colonies we established in nearby systems. And did you succeed? We saved 38 million of them. The other 2 million chose to stay on their homeworld rather than leave the graves of their ancestors." Velthari felt something she had not experienced in centuries. Surprise. They chose to die rather than accept rescue? They chose to face death on their own terms rather than accept a life they felt was not worth living, Admiral Park corrected gently. And we chose to respect that decision, even though we disagreed with it. President Han reappeared in the display. "Elder, that mission cost the Alliance enormous resources and provided no strategic benefit whatsoever. Half the species involved had never heard of the Mindari before the crisis began. But when the call for help went out, hundreds of ships volunteered. Immediately." "Why?" Velthari asked. "Because that's what the Alliance is for. Not to control or dominate or profit, but to help. To make sure that no one faces the darkness alone." Velthari was quiet for a long moment, processing what she had heard. In all her years of watching galactic civilization, she had never seen anything like what humans had built. Not an empire based on conquest, not a trade network based on exploitation, but a voluntary association of species united by the simple idea that they were stronger together than apart. "There is something I must tell you," she said finally. "Something I did not say to the Council 5 years ago because I thought they would not understand." "What is that, Elder?" "When I warned them about humans, I spoke of your refusal to accept defeat, your ability to find solutions to impossible problems, your tendency to fight for others rather than just yourselves. But there was something else, something that frightened me more than all the rest." President Han leaned forward slightly. "What frightened you, Elder?" "Your capacity for growth. Most species reach a certain level of development and then stagnate. They find a comfortable way of living and stop pushing forward. But humans never stop growing, never stop learning, never stop trying to become better than they were." Velthari activated her own holographic display, showing data that her people had collected over the past 5 years. "Since your arrival in galactic space, you have not only revolutionized technology and economics and politics, you have also changed yourselves." The display showed the progression of human development since first contact. Not just technological advancement, but social evolution, cultural growth, philosophical development. Humans had looked at the problems of galactic civilization and asked not just how to fix them, but how to become the kind of beings capable of fixing them. The humans who first came to the stars were remarkable, Velthari continued. But the humans of today are something more. You have learned from every species you have encountered, adopted the best parts of their cultures, incorporated their wisdom into your own worldview. You are becoming something that has never existed before. What do you think we're becoming? President Han asked. I think, Velthari said slowly, that you are becoming what galactic civilization was always supposed to be, but never managed to become. Not a collection of separate species competing for dominance, but a single community working together toward common goals. The communication device chimed again, and Director Kyung Shin of the Interspecies Cooperation Initiative appeared in the display. Behind her was a massive space station under construction, with ships from hundreds of species working together to build something unprecedented in galactic history. Elder Velthari, Director Shin said, I wanted to show you the progress on the Unity project. It's going to be the first truly integrated research facility in the galaxy, with scientists from every member species working together on problems that affect us all. What kind of problems? Velthari asked. Disease, hunger, environmental damage, resource scarcity, all the challenges that individual species have struggled with alone for millennia. We think we can solve them faster by combining our knowledge and working as a team. Velthari studied the images of the space station. It was massive beyond imagination, with sections designed for species with different environmental needs, gravity, requirements, and atmospheric preferences. But it was also beautiful in a way that transcended mere functionality. It looked like hope, given physical form. Director Shin, she said, may I ask you a personal question? Of course, Elder. Are you happy with what you have built? Does this new galaxy satisfy you, or do you already have plans to change it further? Director Shin smiled, and in that expression, Velthari saw the answer to her question. Elder, we've barely gotten started. This is just the foundation. The real work begins when we start exploring beyond our own galaxy, when we make contact with other galactic civilizations, when we begin to understand our place in the universe itself. And you believe other galactic civilizations will welcome contact with humans? I believe they'll benefit from it whether they welcome it or not, just like the species here did. As the communication ended, Velthari stood alone in her observation chamber and contemplated what she had learned. The old Galactic Council had dismissed her warnings about humanity, because they could not imagine beings who,